Hello and welcome to the Hardcore Soft Skills Podcast. This is Gabi Caro. In each episode, we delve into a different skill with the help of an expert in tech, academia, and many other fields. After each episode, you can start applying the skills to advance in your career and to become a better leader. I believe soft skills make hard skills work. Today, we'll learn about networking. My guest today is a master at networking, and this skill has driven his success. Jordan Harbinger is a Wall Street lawyer turned podcaster, and in the Jordan Harbinger Show, he has interviewed top celebrities, authors, political leaders, sport legends, and this show has about 11 million downloads per month. Those of us new in podcasting aspire to one day have at least half of the success he has had. In each show, he emphasizes the need to network. He says, dig the well before you are thirsty, which means start networking now, not when you need to. He created a free course which provides key strategies to network, and today we speak about some of these. I am an avid listener of his show and was quite excited to be able to have this conversation where he shared very interesting stories. Let's listen. So thank you so much for your time. And
yeah, of course.
Yeah, and I'm just actually very happy to be able to talk to you and as a being a listener of your show and hearing a lot from all the shows that you've had. And I was very interested in your particular experience, and you seem to be the expert in networking. So I want to be able to pick your brain and get to understand a little bit more. So I did want to know in terms of why did you pick of the courses that you have offered. You were a lawyer, you have done all these things throughout your career and in your life. Why pick the topic of networking as a course?
Yeah, well, I picked the topic of networking as a course because, to be clear, I teach this course to intelligence agencies, special forces, whatever, corporations. I mean, now during COVID, I just do Zoom calls like everyone else, but I also created the 6-minute networking course, which is online, which is just free. And the reason I did that is because a lot of the problems that I noticed that people are having, whether it's getting a job, getting into college, or a multitude of other kind of problems that people were having in their lives or careers, kind of all came down to lack of connections. And it was like, oh, how do I get a job? Oh, I don't know anyone. Oh, how do I get into this particular program? Well, I don't really know anyone. How do I get help with this situation? Well, I don't really know anyone who can help me. And I heard that over and over and over again. And I kept teaching that on the Jordan Harbinger show, like these little techniques here and there. And then people kept saying, oh, do you have a course for this? Do you have a course for this? And I thought, I don't want to be yet another like influencer who makes a course, especially since I make my money from advertising on the Jordan Harbinger show. So I just thought, okay, I'm just going to make this course and offer it for free. And even though it kind of costs me money because I have to pay for the hosting of the course and I had to make the course and have people edit it and all that stuff, I just thought it was a good value add for the audience. And it gets people to sort of see that networking is not really that hard. You know, people go, oh, I don't want to go to mixers. I don't want to go to these events. I can't afford to meet these people. I don't have anything to offer. And I was like, if we could just kind of dip people's toes in the water and show them, hey, it's as simple as maintaining contact with people over time. It can be texting 4 people a day. It could be emailing people once every 6 months just so they know you're still alive and see what you're doing, you know, and they count you as part of their extended circle. That alone is enough to get people going and kind of kick the rust off for some of the college students or people early in their career or older people that have sort of not necessarily stagnated, but maybe like as you get older and you're in a career, like I assume your network is mostly people in the military that you work with, right? So a lot of times we're in a career for a decade and we go, crap, I only know people who are like quality assurance managers at Ford Motor Company and other people that work in Ford. I don't know anybody who works anywhere else. So you get really kind of, what is it? Like your network kind of gets baked in, right, to your life, and you don't really shake the rust off. You don't really extend it. You don't really expand it. And then if anything ever happens, you get laid off or you want to make a job change, you're just like, I only know teachers in my school districts. You know, I don't know anyone else. Where am I going to start? It's a lot easier to keep something moving forward than it is to start from scratch at age 55 or 40 or 30, right?
Yeah. And what I liked about the course is that it's kind of COVID proof because it's a lot
Yeah.
based on like maintaining those contacts through your email or just
Yeah.
kind of taking little exercises. And because going to networking events, when I try to go to networking events before pre-COVID, it was just so awkward and it was just very difficult. So
Hmm.
um, you were not always this way, kind of, uh, you have mentioned on your show that you were more, is it introverted or just more like shy, or how would you describe yourself in terms of socially
Yeah.
awkward?
Sure. I mean, maybe I was awkward. I don't know. I don't even know if I had enough, if I talked enough to be considered awkward at that point. I was just really shy when I was in middle school. You know, I was really quiet, really shy. I read a lot of stuff. I did a lot of stuff on the internet, which was brand new at the time. You know, I wasn't like everyone else was outside skating and stealing candy from a corner store. And I was like, yeah, that's dumb. You know, I like riding my bike and everything, but have you guys seen the internet? And they were all kind of like, who cares? Who cares you can access a library? Who cares you can talk to hackers in Israel? Like, who cares? And I thought, this is like the new world. You know, you have no idea how big this is going to be. It's going to dominate every facet of everyone's life. And they were like, yeah, let's go to Kroger and steal Twizzlers. And I was just like, okay, you know, so I didn't have a whole lot in common with the other guys and gals my age. And so I just sort of stopped dealing with them. And then as I got to high school, I realized I wasn't really like socially inept or anything. You know, I had girls and guys that I hung out with all the time. I had girlfriends, but there wasn't a whole lot. I didn't feel like I had anything in common with anyone. And so creating relationships with people online was something that I started doing. And I realized now, 2020 hindsight, it's a skill, you know, like that was a skill that I built being online a lot. And people now are finally starting to realize, and young people know this already, but they're finally starting to realize you have to do this. Back when I started connecting with people online, my parents, you know, when I lived at home, they were like, "Ooh, be careful meeting people on the internet." And then in college, it was like, meet people on the internet. And then as I started meeting girls on the internet, my friends were like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, hold on. There are women on the internet? Hang on." You know, so, and then it was like everybody was on the internet in the early aughts. And I started a business on the internet and people were like, "You have an internet business? Whatever, you loser." And now I'm like, their landlord, you know?
Yeah.
So it really has changed. So yeah, I started off shy, but I also started off being able to build relationships online, which now everyone has to do. And if you're not building relationships online, I don't even know how you're doing it, especially in a COVID kind of age. I mean, how do you do it if not online?
And how do you translate those relationships that you do online and you have this particular persona, or it comes easy to do it online, into the workplace or the outside when you interact with people? Are there any things that you kind of transfer from there into the hanging out with people not online?
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, I'm building relationships with people all the time, mostly online now because it's COVID and I don't leave my house like everyone else. But, you know, I make sure that the tricky thing with people online is, of course, a lot of times you're only a profile photo in messages or emails. And so I always try and add in personal details. When look, I'm not talking to perfect strangers. I'm talking to industry people or other business people. I add in personal details. I start to gradually ask more personal questions, and that way, when I meet people from LinkedIn or something like that for a business transaction, they're not like, so we were emailing and it's weird." It's like they already know a lot about me because I've been open about certain things. I already know a lot about them because I've sort of done the research. So I bring those into the conversation to sort of merge those two worlds, right? I merge the online. I say, "Yeah, you were mentioning the other day that you were late for something because you were walking your dog. What kind of dog do you have?" You know, or you can look on social media and say, "Hey, you know, I could use a vacation. Where have you gone recently? I saw some photos on your profile that looked like a nice and warm place." And then you get them talking about something. What you don't want to do is be like, "I looked at every photo on Facebook. It looks like you have 3 dogs and 2 cats, and you also like milk." You know, like you don't want to be that guy, but you want to use that information to generate conversation in the real world once we're allowed to sort of be in the real world again.
What's another thing that you have seen that it's a no-no when it comes to either networking online, or, for example, like contact you and say, "Hey, you have a job for me," or something like that? Are there any no-nos that definitely people should be avoiding when it comes to networking?
Sure. So one of the major problems that I see is people don't dig the well. Like I always say, dig the well before you get thirsty, which means build relationships before you need them. And what people do, what I've noticed a lot of people do, is they will essentially say something like, "Oh, well, I'm busy right now." And I go, great, but what happens when you need something? And of course, the most inexperienced people say, why would anything happen? Why would anything happen? I'm fine where I'm at. And I understand there's a level of ignorance, and I don't really fault people for that. Like if you're a preschool teacher, I got this from a preschool teacher, and she said, I don't need networking because I like my job. And I said, look, I'm glad to hear that. But what happens if your job goes away? And she's like, well, I'm a preschool teacher. I can just get another job somewhere else as a preschool teacher. And I said, how would you go about doing that? And she's like, well, I would just submit applications. And I'd said, okay, so let's say your school closes and I'm a preschool teacher right next to you. Every day we have two classrooms right next to each other. I know a bunch of other preschool teachers. I know school administrators. I know people in private schools. I know people in education programs. Our school closes tomorrow because of funding. You and I are applying for the same jobs. Who gets the job? And she was like, oh, okay, now I get it. But then there is also this pushback well, that's not fair. And I said, okay, how many things in life have been completely fair? And then it's I kind of have to hold people's hands through this. And I understand why. I don't think these people are stupid or anything. It's a lack of experience. And the problem is we don't always end jobs on our own terms. When I was a lawyer, I was in the middle of, I worked in real estate finance in 2007. And so in 2008, when we had an economy crash, my law firm went under and hundreds of lawyers were out of business, unemployed overnight. And they all applied to the exact same law firms at the exact same jobs that didn't exist anymore. And many of them never got jobs again or couldn't get jobs for 2-3 years after that. They were in trouble. And so you have to dig the well before you get thirsty. And I see a lot of people do this with me too. They'll say something like, hey, Jordan, I was wondering if you could help me with something. And I'll look for their email in my inbox and I'll go, oh, we have all these other threads where I asked them for something or asked them questions and they just didn't bother to reply. And I'll say, hey, what happened to our previous email threads? You never answered. And they'll go, oh, well, life got in the way. And I'd say something like, okay, but do I want to hire you when you can't answer your own email because life got in the way? And I remember one guy goes, yeah, but I guess that conversation wasn't really that important. And I go, well, this conversation's not important to me. Is it important to you? And they were like, oh, crap, because they needed a job, but they didn't think it was important to dig the well before they got thirsty. So, of course, I never hire those people because they don't understand the concepts that I work with every single day here on the Jordan Harbinger show. But that's their loss. I don't, according to them, oh man, you're missing out on hiring me. And for me, I'm like, there's 500 people that want this job at this organization. You blew it. They need to realize this. And I hate when people learn things the hard way, which is why I give away a lot of free resources like 6-minute networking and networking lessons and ideas. But I find people make that mistake all the time. And it's forgivable, but you're not going to recover because people will say things like, okay, Jordan, I didn't dig the well before I got thirsty. I really need a job now. What's the way that I recover from this, fast? And I say, you start from the beginning. And they're like, yeah, but I don't have time. I don't have time to start digging now. This is an emergency. I don't have a job. I need healthcare. And I go, I gave you the shortcut 3 years ago. You were supposed to start then. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of sad because you see people really eating some cement, on this one, especially during COVID when there's tons of layoffs and businesses are going under. My inbox is full of uh-oh, I should have done this 5 years ago, 3 years ago. Now what do I do? And I'm like, yeah, you go back to the line. You go to the end of the line, mm-hmm. With everyone else. Yeah. And all those people that started earlier, they are falling into new positions now. You are not going to be so lucky, probably.
Yeah, yeah. And has it been, since you have been you had experience as an exchange student before and living internationally. And I wonder when it comes to networking, because you're used to network as a person regularly with the people within your country or within your city or things along those lines. Are there any lessons that you take or things to consider when you're trying to network with people from other cultures or that are kind of different from your background?
Yeah, I mean, it sort of depends culture to culture. I noticed that people who are maybe a little bit warmer, like South America, Central America, whatever you want to call it, you can kind of almost jump in right away to some more personal things. And they'll love to talk about it. But then when you try that with somebody working in Singapore, Asia, or where you live in Germany, they'll ignore those questions. I remember writing to somebody who was in Poland, and I said something like, "Oh, your name's really interesting. Is that Polish or is that, Slavic?" And she goes, "Here is your invoice for the ads that you are buying. Thank you and have a good day." And I was like, did that send properly? And it's like, and then I realized, and I've done business with her again and again. And I asked her again and I said, "Hey, I know I asked you this a while ago and feel free to not to answer me, but is your name Polish?" And she was like, "Yeah, it is. I just thought that was a weird question the first time I got it. So I didn't answer you, but now I know you. And yeah, it's Polish." And I went, "Oh, okay. They need the kind of the slow play. You don't knock on your neighbor's door in Germany and be like, 'Yo, let's hang out.' They're like, 'Who are you and why are you here? What are you doing?" And I remember when I lived in Germany, I'd be walking down the road and I would wave to the neighbors and they would look at me like I was some sort of alien. And I would talk to my family because I lived with a host family as an exchange student. And they'd go, "Hey man, you're too friendly." And I'd go, "You grew up here. You're 15. Don't you know them?" And he's like, "Yeah, but we don't really talk to them." It wasn't that they don't talk to their next door neighbor. They were real tight with some of the immediate neighbors, but it was like 2 blocks away. We don't know those people. You have to have seen those people a minimum of 100 times growing up here. You turn down this road 3 times, 5 times a day, every day of your life. You've never seen this guy getting his mail, getting out in the driveway, getting in his car. They just don't talk. And that's interesting because when I lived in Panama, I would be walking around and there'd be some guys and they'd be like, "Hey, where are you guys from?" And we'd be like, "Oh, United States." And they'd be like, "Oh, hey, come have a drink with us right now. We're just hanging out." And then, then they're like getting your phone number and they want to hang out. And I'm like, "Is this normal?" And, should we be suspicious? And they're like, "No, they just really wanted to meet foreigners." There's not a whole lot of white dudes walking around Panama hanging out that aren't in a military uniform,
Exactly.
So it's kind of fun. Same thing with Mexico, Philippines, all those sort of warmer cultures. But man, God forbid you say hi to your neighbor in China. They will be like, "Who is this person?" Again, not your next door neighbor that knows you really well, but the people on the first floor of your building, you just pretend you didn't even see them.
Yeah. Has there been any particular situation where either networking has gotten you out of trouble or I don't know, or
Sure.
been super beneficial?
Yeah, I mean, definitely in places like Panama where you might get in trouble with a cop who wants some money and you're not able to provide, I mean, there's definitely like, "Hey, do you know this person?" Without sounding intimidating, without sounding like you're threatening them, like, "Hey, I don't have anything right now, but I could drop this by later. So, I work at the U.S. Embassy and we work with this guy. Maybe you know him. Could I give the money to him to give to you?" And then they're often like, "Oh, yeah, no, you know what? Don't even worry about it. Don't tell Commander Rosales we even met. Actually, probably best." There's a lot of that kind of thing. But there's also been times where I've lived abroad where I've run into issues and the police don't care. And then I've got to contact somebody that I know who contacts somebody that they know who contacts that person's boss. And then suddenly people care. So unfortunately, these relationships work best in societies that don't have strong rule of law. And you find this also in China, the concept of guanxi, which are like relationships, small favors. Often when rule of law doesn't get things done, the fact that that guy's boss's boss's boss, that's what gets things done. And it turns out to be this whole sort of respect hierarchy. So yes, networking can get things done, but usually it just leads to opportunity in places like the United States, Europe, because you know people and they think of you for a job or for an opportunity, not because you need to skirt the rules or make up rules that don't exist or, get out of some sort of pickle. Networking usually leads to opportunity, but the best networkers are usually people in countries with weak rule of law, such as communist countries. I mean, I learned about networking in the first place when I lived in Germany, because I lived in the former East. And I remember my host father saying things like, "Hey, we used to get certain things done because I would know this person who would know this other person." And I thought, that's so weird and not how you're supposed to do things. But then I saw it really kind of do well with German bureaucracy, because I was going to get my visa. This is my first sort of memory of networking in action. I was going to get my visa to live in Germany for a year. Mm-hmm. And there was a massive line. I mean, huge. And my host father goes, "This can't be the line you have to wait in," because everybody was like, it was like a refugee line kind of. And I don't mean that in any disparaging way, but everyone looked like they were like people holding babies and with all their bags, and I was just rolling in like having just slept a full night, full belly kind of situation with my German family. And they walked up to the front of the line and they were like, does he need to wait in this line? And they were like, oh yeah, everyone waits in this line. And he said, okay, this is an American exchange student. And then this guy walked in and goes, oh, hey, don't I know you from, aren't you the guy that plays in this band or whatever? And he was like, yeah. And he goes, this is my American son. He just needs a visa. I'm wondering if we have to wait in this line. And they were like, no. This is real easy paperwork. You don't have to see an immigration attorney or a judge. This is not a refugee situation. I'll just fill it out right now. You don't have to wait. This is probably 3, 4, 5 hour line. Oh, and then that's how I got my visa. And I was like, whoa, that was so cool. Now, look, that wasn't corruption. That was just bureaucratic mess. I'm not a controversial person to let into the country for 10 months or a year, right? I'm an exchange student. I'm 17. I'm not going to move there and stay there. But my host father told me that when he was back when it was East Germany, to get a driver's license took like 1 or 2 years.
Oh, wow.
So what he did is he wrote to his cousin in Canada, had him send over a case of whiskey and some blue jeans. So then he went to the driving school instructor and said, hey man, I already know how to drive. And the guy's like, well, I'll be the judge of that. And he's like, well, why don't you have some of this whiskey and tell me if I'm a good enough driver? And so he drove the car and the guy's like, it looks like you know how to drive just fine. Whatever. Here are the street signs you need to know. Stamp. And he goes to the police and the police say, hey, there's like an 8-month backup on giving you a driver's license, even though you have the stamped paper. And he goes, how much is the backup when you have some of this delicious Jack Daniels? And they were like, oh, turns out we can accomplish this right away if you have the Jack Daniels in the back of your car that you're not supposed to be driving. And he was like, sure thing. So he got his driver's license in like 2 days or 2 weeks or whatever it was instead of 2 years. And that's corruption, right? But that's how I learned that networking is like this superpower that you definitely want to have it, even if you don't need to use it.
Yeah, I need to ask, because I was just looking at an interview that was published that you mentioned that you use a CRM to maintain contacts. Is that something that you did before, or how does that?
So the way that this works was whenever I meet someone new or I decide like this is a person I want to keep in touch with, I add their name into a CRM, which is some software. It's called ConnectionFox.com, and it's free. I think it's free. It's got a free tier anyway. And you can add in, a few hundred people in there, and then every 6 months, or you tell it when you want to be reminded that you need to contact these people again if you haven't. And every 6 months or so, it'll pop up and say like, oh, you haven't talked with Roger so-and-so in 6 months. And I'll go, oh, okay, send him a text, send him an email, whatever, and then I mark it in the CRM. And so I never lose touch with people, really, because they're all in there. And I get reminders every day. These are the 5 people that you haven't contacted in 6 months. So I shoot them a note. Hey, how you doing? It's been 6, 8 months, whatever it's been. Still need a vacation. Last I heard you were over in Germany working. Are you still there? And then the person's like, oh yeah, no, I actually moved back to Puerto Rico. It's great. I'm getting a tan, whatever. And you just have these light sort of fluffy conversations. But the thing is, sometimes that leads to opportunity. Sometimes it makes more sense to connect on a deeper level. Like they say, actually, now that you're in my inbox, I'm starting a podcast. Do you have any tips for me? Whatever it is. And other times when I need something, I can reach out to them again. And it's not weird because they heard from me every 6 months for 2 years. So they're not like, well, what's your problem? What do you want? You want to sell me something? It's not weird because they're hearing from somebody that they're used to hearing from. Whereas most people, you haven't heard from them in like 8 years, 5 years, 2 years. They email you and you're like, what does this person want? And they're like, oh, I just want to chat. And you're like, about what? Because you think they're going to sell you some protein shakes or something, right? And you got to be kind of careful. And it gets really old really fast when you hear from 5 of those people a month and they all want something. So then you start to put your guard up, right? And then it's harder to get through. So what I recommend people do is, again, to dig the well before you're thirsty. You reach out to those people and they go, everybody who reaches out cold, they want something. But then you reconnect and you don't want anything. And then 6 months later, you do it again. And 6 months later, you do it again. So pretty soon with you, their guard is down. And then you're having real interactions and they treat you like somebody is part of their extended circle. But everybody else who goes, no, I just wanted to reconnect. By the way, do you want to join my Herbalife cult? Then you're like, I knew it. And then you never answer them again, right? They're on your blacklist, so to speak. And so you want to get through that. And the only way to do that is over time. That's why when people say, no, how do I get through to people immediately? I need something. I go, you are already starting off on the back foot. You're already at every disadvantage possible. Their guard is up and you need something. You're desperate. That's going to come across really, really clear. And even if you hide it well, once you say, and by the way, I need a job, they're going to be like, ugh, I knew it. And they're going to hang up the phone, right? They're theoretically, or just stop answering you. I would, because who's got time for that?
Yeah, certainly. And last couple of questions.
Sure.
And want to take the opportunity to ask as well in terms of why did you start a podcast and how were you able to were you able to use networking to grow your podcast, or what came first, I guess?
I started the podcast and then I realized in order to get guests on the show, on the Jordan Harbinger show, I had to network, right? And this is like 14 years ago. And then I had a different show before the Jordan Harbinger show, and this is where I kind of learned this. But I needed to network to get the guests. And then as I started networking more and more, it started to work better. And then I had a sales role in this training company that I'd started, and I was doing all the sales, and I was like, networking is the way that sales works, so I'm just going to blend sales and networking together and come up with all these different systems and techniques to maintain it. So now my guest roster, which includes some of the most famous people around, like Matthew McConaughey, Kobe Bryant, etc., those people all come through my networking connections. You can't just sort of like sign up and go, I have a podcast and I want to get some A-list celebrities on there. That's not, how it works, especially now that everyone has a podcast. Mm-hmm. So it's more of a networking game that I learned by necessity. And now it helps my business, but it wasn't something where I was just great at it and then decided, oh, I can make a business out of this. The business came first and I was solving my own problems through networking, and that's what allowed my business to really grow and flourish.
All right. And when it comes to is there any particular resource, book, or any other thing that you recommend that people seek out to kind of either become better at networking or anything like that you could recommend?
I mean, definitely just do the course. It's free, 6-minute networking. It's jordanharbinger.com/course. It's free. You don't need to read a book on networking to know that you need to reach out to people early and often, maintain those connections using systems. I mean, yes, there's like Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, and that's always a good primer, but the systems are what's really important. And for a lot of people who are like, ugh, read a whole book, the reason I called it 6-minute networking is it takes like 6 minutes a day. The videos I make in there are like 2-3 minutes long. It's not some big involved thing that most people aren't going to want to do. And that's why I gave it away for free also, because if you charge for something and they're like, yo, there's 20 minutes of stuff that I do over a month, like give me my money back. I wanted it to be like free and really small so that when people go, oh, I just don't have time, I can be like, that's BS. You have time. You waste more time on Instagram you waste 10 times more time on Instagram every day than you would just taking this course.
Yeah, certainly. Well, thank you so much, Jordan, for being a guest in the Hardcore Soft Skills podcast. And I certainly appreciate your time and all the advice that you have given. So again, thank you so much.
Yeah, for sure. I love the name of your show. I think it's really creative. I wish I'd thought of it for my own show, actually, instead of just naming it after myself.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Hardcore Soft Skills podcast. I have more resources for you from today's episode. Just go to the website hardcoresoftskillspodcast.com and subscribe to receive the weekly lessons. If you like what you've heard, give us a 5-star review via the website or via Apple Podcasts and share with others as well. Thank you, and until the next episode.